choosing colors or fonts or layouts. So my PhD work has been on building design tools which understand aesthetics and can help with the difficult tasks of design. So in this project, I focus on the layout problem, a key subproblem of design. Specifically, the problem is given a set of elements with fixed colors and fonts to position and scale the elements to make an aesthetically pleasing layout. So, however, the problem is further complicated because many different layouts can work. In practice, designers need to explore this space of possible layouts, which is difficult and time-consuming because they have to move each element individually. So there's been a lot of related work in mixed initiative interfaces and creativity support tools. However, I'll briefly mention only a few relevant papers. So interfaces which show galleries of related designs have been shown to aid novice users. Parallel prototyping of designs, where novices create multiple versions, produce better designs overall. And finally, interactive layout suggestions have been effective for improving novice-created furniture layouts. So last year, we published a graphic design layout model, which can automatically generate layouts in a variety of styles, such as those shown here. So to model a layout, we use an energy-based function, which evaluates a layout X using energy terms, which encode different design principles. So for example, there are terms which measure the alignment of elements, or the symmetry, among others. So we generate a layout by optimizing this function, although this takes about 40 minutes, which totally ruled out an interactive interface. So in this work, we introduced DesignScape, which builds on our previous model, but is implemented on the GPU, so we can therefore focus on creating interactive layout suggestions. So let's start with a quick demo. So first, I'll show a common type of design interface. So to create a layout, the user has to place each of these elements individually, aligning them correctly, changing the number of lines, which is a tedious and time-consuming process. So by contrast, our system provides layout suggestions to aid the designer. So first, on the left here, we show refinement suggestions, which improve the current layout. And on the right, we show brainstorming suggestions with large-scale changes. So let's look at the refinement suggestions first. So for example, let's move this title to the top left, which creates undesirable overlap. So this system then creates suggestions to improve the layout. The user simply mouses over the suggestion to preview it and then clicks to accept. So these refinement suggestions fix problems with overlap, alignment, and symmetry. The user then continues to modify the layout with the system providing new suggestions after each user interaction. So on the right, the user is shown brainstorming suggestions, which are layouts in a variety of styles which provide starting points to help them explore possible designs. The user can easily select any of these brainstorming suggestions and then begin refining the layout. So the user can control the suggestions in a variety of ways using intuitive constraints. So most importantly, the suggestions are constrained to be similar to the main canvas. However, the user can also lock elements, which prevents them from automatically moving. Alignment lines also act as a weak constraint on the suggestions, keeping aligned elements together and aligning text blocks to the line. And finally, users can constrain elements to have the same size. So to generate brainstorming suggestions, we use a machine learning approach, which learns a parameter space for our model, given a set of training layouts, and we then sample this parameter space in order to generate new layouts with a diverse set of styles. So we also propose a second interface, which adaptively moves elements based on our design model, improving the design in a variety of ways. So for example, if I move this karate figure down, it overlaps with the title. So the system moves the text out of the way, but aligns it correctly. So we found that when the suggestions match the user intent, the interface is really useful and speeds up the design process. When the suggestions don't, it makes designing more frustrating since you're fighting the system. And of course, this is only a first step, and the end goal of a fluid, intuitive design interface is a really exciting one. So retargeting layouts is another common design task. Designers must often create layouts in a variety of sizes, such as widescreen and portrait on a tablet. So our system can easily retarget a layout to a different size, fixing initial problems with overlap and alignment, and providing a good starting point for the designer to begin refinement. Brainstorming suggestions can again be used if a totally new layout is desired for this size. So as another example, here we retarget to a much smaller size, which would require significant work by the designer. Our system easily shifts the elements, providing a reasonable starting point. Finally, our system is very well suited for designing on the tablet, where precise control of elements is fairly difficult. So for example, after moving this image, the system recommends moving the subtitle down, or possibly changing the text. So here's another example where the text will be shifted. Okay, so to evaluate our new interfaces, we compared with a baseline interface with no suggestions. So in a first study, novices on Mechanical Turk created several designs with one of the three interfaces. And in a second study, other novices evaluated the designs using A/B testing. So here I show the fraction of users who preferred designs from the new interfaces. So overall, the designs from the new interfaces are better than those from the baseline. In a third study, we also had users compare the interfaces directly. Here the results were more mixed. Some people preferred the new interfaces, while others felt that suggestions actually removed creativity. So in conclusion, this project is an initial attempt to use aesthetic models and machine learning to aid design. Besides improving the model interface, one exciting direction is developing a holistic interface, which makes suggestions for all aspects of design, including fonts and colors, as well as layout. Making suggestions in a creativity support tool raises many questions around the balance between automatic assistance and enabling user creativity. And finally, suggestion-based design has enormous potential for devices like smartphones and tablets. There's many design apps out there already, like Canva and Studio, but the small size and lack of precise control make them difficult to use. So suggestions could greatly improve the design process here. Thank you for listening.
Hi, Steve Drucker, Microsoft Research. Great work, really enjoyed it. One thing I was curious about is in the refinements, sometimes subtle differences aren't immediately obvious. So, for instance, they might be aligned along the center, or they might just be aligned along the left and you can't quite see it. Did people ever sort of say, I didn't know what the differences between these refinements were?
So in the refinement suggestions, we tried to have a mix so that there were, basically I didn't describe it, but on the top there were ones that were sort of close and the ones in the middle and the further ones are supposed to be farther apart. So the idea was to try to provide a range of suggestions. But this often depended on the design, right? If you were in sort of a good space, when the refinement suggestions wouldn't provide big changes from that. So in those situations, I think the users would have difficulty. Yeah.
So I was just wondering whether you ever needed any other explanation about what were the distinctions, like this was literally
right, and so that was actually one interesting idea where we were considering putting some visualizations on which would show particularly, this is exactly what's being changed. Because you're right, and when you mouse over, you could see the differences, but sometimes if there was slight differences, it was tricky, right? But yeah.
Great, thanks, great work.
I'm afraid we just have time for one more question, and so you at the back there, yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rita Jalal, and I'm from INRIA. So I have a question that's related, I have actually two questions. One that is related to the previous one slightly, and I was wondering if you have thoughts about telling the user why the system suggests this particular change, in order for the user to actually learn how to, the rules that the system is using. So that's the first question. The second is, have you also thought about how to express or allow the user to express relationships that are related to the concept the user has in mind, where aligning elements on a page, relationships between the elements within this page. So for instance, if the user has in mind that this is designed for a particular age or for a particular type of documents, and he has an idea he wants to express in mind, he might want to put together a certain type of relationships.
So to answer your second question first, you're right. I mean, and one of our interface was basically designed for novices in a very sort of simple way, and we didn't really put in many relationships. But I think it's definitely a limitation of the system, and one we were considering going forward, because often you do want to sort of preserve those relationships. You know, retargeting is a good example of this, where you might have particular groups of things which you want to enforce a relationship that even if you switch to a totally new layout, that relationship has to be preserved in some way. Sorry, what was the first question again?
Yeah, the first question is about, okay. It's just like telling the user why the system does this particular change so that the user learns and knows what is actually happening.
Right. I definitely think having those kind of cues are important. In some sense, it's tricky because you don't want a suggestion-based interface that's criticizing the user too strongly, and so we found that there was pushback from the users if they felt that the suggestion was sort of telling them the right decision and what was a good design and what was bad design, they were kind of annoyed. It was better to sort of provide sort of suggestions and let them decide, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I apologize to the people who want to ask questions, but